The loudest person in the room almost never wins the argument. They win the noise. And noise and victory are not the same thing. In fact, every time you raise your voice in a disagreement, every time you interrupt, every time you push harder and lean forward and turn up the emotional pressure, you are doing something that feels like fighting but is actually losing. Because the moment a conversation becomes a battle of volume, the person who stays calm has already won the psychological frame, even if they have not yet won the argument. The most dangerous people in any discussion are not the ones who shout. They are the ones who never need to. The ones who sit back slightly, who speak quietly, who ask questions instead of making accusations, who agree with you in one breath and dismantle you in the next. They do not fight your position directly. They use your own words, your own logic, your own momentum against you. And by the time you realize what has happened, you have talked yourself into their conclusion without ever feeling pushed. This is called conversational judo, and it is the most powerful social skill available to a human being in conflict. Today you are going to learn exactly how it works, why the psychology behind it is almost impossible to resist, and how to use it in any disagreement, any negotiation, any difficult conversation, without raising your voice once. Let us start with the most counterintuitive move in the entire system, agreeing first. When someone comes at you with a position you completely disagree with, every instinct in your nervous system wants to push back immediately, to correct them, to establish that they are wrong and you know why. And that instinct, while completely understandable, is the single most reliable way to lose the influence game in any conversation. Because the moment you push back, the other person stops listening to you. They stop processing your argument. Their brain enters a defensive posture, what psychologists call psychological reactance, and every word you say from that point forward is filtered through one question. How do I protect my position from this person who is attacking it? Agreeing first dissolves that defense before it can form. Not fake agreement. Not sycophantic nodding that anyone can see through in seconds. Real, genuine agreement with the parts of what they said that are actually true. And there are almost always parts that are actually true. Most positions, even ones you fundamentally oppose, contain some truth at the edges. Finding that truth and naming it first does something extraordinary to the brain of the person you are talking to. It lowers their guard. It signals that you are not an enemy of their thinking. And a person who does not feel attacked is a person whose mind is still open. You say something like this: "You are completely right that this situation has been handled badly. I think that is an absolutely fair point." And then you pause. Let them feel the agreement. Let it land. And then, softly and without any change in your tone, you continue. "Where I think we see it differently is in what caused it. Can I show you what I found?" You have just made the most powerful move in the entire conversation without raising your voice once. You validated their reality. You joined their side of the table. And then, from that position of alliance, you redirected the direction of travel entirely. That is conversational judo. You used their momentum, their need to be understood, to bring them somewhere they never expected to go. Now we go deeper. The Socratic question trap. Socrates never told anyone they were wrong. Not once. He asked questions. Careful, specific, sequenced questions that led the person he was talking to down a path of reasoning until they arrived, on their own, at the conclusion that contradicted their starting position. And when they got there, when they said the thing that dismantled their own argument, there was nothing to fight, nothing to reject, because the thought was theirs. They built it themselves. Socrates just handed them the tools. Here is how this looks in a real conversation. Say someone insists that a decision was made unfairly and they are completely certain of it. You do not tell them they are wrong. You ask, what would a fair process have looked like? You let them answer. Then you ask, and in the process that actually happened, which of those steps was missing? You let them answer again. Then you ask, and if that step was missing, what would need to be true for that to have been intentional rather than an oversight? Watch what happens. With each question, they are not just answering you. They are doing the thinking themselves. They are building the counterargument to their own position using their own reasoning. And by the third or fourth question, one of two things happens. Either they realize out loud that their certainty was built on an incomplete picture, or they become defensive, which tells you and every observer in the room exactly where their logic has a hole. The Socratic question trap works because of a principle called the generation effect in cognitive psychology. Information that a person generates themselves is retained more deeply and trusted more completely than information they receive from an outside source. You telling someone they are wrong is information they can reject. Them discovering it themselves is a conclusion they cannot easily walk away from. Always end your questions with, "What do you think?" or "Does that feel accurate to you?" Make them the author of every insight, and they will trust those insights the way they could never trust yours. Now the third tool, the information bomb. There is a moment in every disagreement where one person has visibly done more homework than the other, where the depth of their preparation becomes undeniable. And that moment is not won by dumping everything you know at once in a chaotic avalanche of facts. It is won by deploying information with surgical precision at exactly the moment when the other person's argument reaches its weakest point. You listen. You let them make their case fully. You ask your Socratic questions. And when you arrive at the precise joint in their logic that cannot hold weight, that is when you reach into what you prepared and place the specific piece of evidence that speaks directly to that joint. Not everything you know. The one thing that matters most in this exact moment. And here is the delivery that makes it land. You say it quietly. You say it with the calm of someone who has known this for a while and was simply waiting for the right moment. Not triumphantly. Not with the energy of someone proving a point. With the energy of someone who finds the facts interesting, because that calm is its own form of authority. It signals that you are not emotionally invested in being right. You are invested in what is true, and people trust that signal even when they resist the information itself. Now the final tool, the rule of three. The human brain has a documented preference for groups of three. Not two, which feels incomplete. Not four, which feels excessive. 3 feels whole. 3 feels raisoned. 3 feels like enough to believe. Rhetoricians have known this for thousands of years. Every great speech, every persuasive argument, everything that has ever been written to change a mind has used it instinctively or deliberately. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Veni, vidi, vici, blood, sweat, and tears. When you are making your case in any discussion, you do not need 10 reasons. 10 reasons make you sound like you are trying too hard. 10 reasons make the other person feel overwhelmed rather than convinced. You need 3. The strongest 3 you have. Delivered with space between them so each one has room to land. Delivered with the quiet confidence of someone who knows that 3 solid reasons are more persuasive than 10 anxious ones. You structure it simply. There are 3 things I want you to consider. Then you name them. 1, pause. 2, pause. 3, and then you stop. You do not summarize. You do not restate. You let the 3 sit in the air. Because 3 reasons delivered cleanly and confidently feel, to the listening brain, like the conversation is complete. Like the case has been made. Like further argument would require overturning not one point but all 3 simultaneously. Now here is the deeper truth that all 4 of these tools are built on. Winning a discussion is not about being louder. It is not about being more relentless. It is not about having the most energy or the most anger or the most certainty. It is about understanding the psychology of how minds actually change. And minds do not change because they are forced to. Minds change because they are guided gently to a place where they can see something they could not see before, and they feel like they got there themselves. The person who raises their voice in a disagreement is telling you something important about their relationship to their own argument. They are telling you the argument cannot carry itself without the force of their emotion behind it. But a person who lowers their voice, who agrees before they redirect, who asks instead of accuses, who lets facts speak quietly instead of shouting them, that person is telling you something very different. They are telling you they do not need to force you. They are patient enough to lead you. And patience in a disagreement is not passivity. It is the highest form of conversational confidence available. It is the signal that you are not afraid of the conversation taking time, that you are not afraid of the other person's position, that you know where this is going, and you are content to let the logic do the walking. You do not need to be the loudest voice in the room to be the one that changes it. You need to be the clearest, the calmest, the most prepared, and the most willing to let the other person arrive at your conclusion believing it was always their own. That is not manipulation. That is the highest form of respect you can pay to another person's intelligence. You trusted it enough to let it find its way to the truth without being dragged.